Every alien in my district believes I performed the boldest romantic gesture a human has ever done in recorded galactic history. The truth is much less impressive. It started with a staircase, a bucket of cleaning foam, and an alien maid who took her job far too seriously. When humanity joined the galactic community, nobody expected our biggest cultural exchange to involve domestic help. Yet within a few years it became completely normal to see alien workers employed across human colonies. Some worked as technicians, some as assistants, and others as domestic staff who preferred quiet work over interstellar politics. That's how she ended up working in my house. Her name was Kilira, though she once explained that the sound didn't translate perfectly into human language. Apparently, the original pronunciation involved vibrating throat plates that humans didn't possess. I told her Kilira sounded fine to me. She accepted that with a small nod and never corrected me again. Kilira belonged to a species known across several sectors as disciplined, proud, and mildly terrifying when angered. They were tall, built with long limbs and powerful shoulders, and moved with the kind of balance that made everything look effortless. Even carrying cleaning equipment, she looked like a soldier preparing for combat. At first I assumed the serious attitude was just her personality. Then I realized it was her culture. She didn't simply clean rooms. She secured them. She didn't wipe tables. She restored operational surfaces. And whenever she finished organizing something, she stepped back, placed one fist against her chest, and said in a calm voice, "Task complete. Order restored." The first time she did it, I laughed. The second time, I realized she wasn't joking. By the third week, I had simply accepted that my alien maid treated dust like it was an invading army. Despite her intense personality, Kilira was surprisingly easy to live with. She was quiet, efficient, and strangely considerate. If she noticed I was working late, she would quietly leave a drink beside my desk. If I forgot to eat, she would appear in the kitchen and remind me with the calm tone of someone issuing a battlefield recommendation. "You will perform better with adequate nutrition," she would say. It was oddly comforting. Still, there were moments when her alien upbringing showed in strange ways. Sometimes while cleaning, she would talk about traditions from her homeworld. Things about honor, trust, protection. One day, she mentioned something that stuck in my memory, though at the time I didn't think much about it. "In my people's culture," she said while organizing the storage cabinet, "physical gestures during moments of danger carry powerful meaning." I leaned against the doorway, sipping coffee. "Like what?" I asked. She paused for a moment, considering how to explain it. "For example," she said carefully, "if one individual stands behind another during a threat and restrains them to prevent harm, it symbolizes responsibility. A declaration that the protector accepts the burden of safety." I blinked. "That sounds complicated." "It is simple for us," she replied calmly. "Protection is the highest expression of trust." I nodded slowly, though honestly, I wasn't paying much attention. Alien cultures were full of strange traditions. I figured this was just another one. If I had realized what that explanation would eventually cause, I would have asked a lot more questions. The incident happened 3 days later. Our house had a narrow staircase leading down toward the lower living area. It wasn't dangerous, but the steps were slightly steeper than standard human designs. Normally, that wasn't a problem, until Kilira decided to carry an entire container of cleaning foam down them. I was sitting in the living room when I heard the noise. First came the soft thump of a foot slipping, then the sudden clatter of a bucket hitting wood. I turned my head just in time to see Kilira losing her balance near the top of the stairs. For a split second, everything seemed to slow down. The container tipped. White cleaning foam splashed across the step. Her foot slid forward, and her center of gravity shifted in exactly the wrong direction. She was about to fall. I didn't think about alien traditions or cultural rituals or anything else. I just reacted. I ran forward up the stairs and grabbed her. My arms wrapped around her from behind, locking across her upper torso as I pulled her backward away from the edge of the steps. Her body tensed instantly. The bucket tumbled down the stairs with a hollow clatter, foam splashing across the floor below. But Kilira didn't move. For a moment, she went completely still in my arms. I expected her to regain balance and step away. Instead, she froze. Slowly, very slowly, she turned her head and looked back at me. Her eyes were wide. Not angry, not embarrassed, just stunned. Human, she said quietly. Yes, I answered, still holding her, because I wasn't sure if she was steady yet. You have just performed the guardian hole. I blinked. The what? She carefully stepped away and turned around to face me. Up close, I could see something unusual in her expression. Normally, Kilira carried herself with calm confidence, but right now she looked deeply serious, almost ceremonial. In my culture, she explained slowly, grasping someone from behind during danger signifies the acceptance of protective responsibility. I rubbed the back of my neck awkwardly.
Oh.
I mean, you were about to fall. Yes, she said. That's why I grabbed you. She studied me carefully for several long seconds. Then, to my complete confusion, she placed her fist over her chest and bowed her head slightly. Then from this moment forward, she said with quiet pride, I acknowledge your protection. I laughed nervously. Hey, you don't have to be dramatic about it. I was just stopping you from falling. But Kilira didn't laugh. She straightened her posture and looked directly at me. Her voice was calm.
Certain.
And you succeeded. She paused before adding one final sentence. In my people's traditions, such a gesture is not performed lightly. I waved my hand dismissively. Trust me, it wasn't intentional. She simply smiled faintly. For the first time since I had met her, the expression looked almost warm. That, she said softly, is exactly what a humble guardian would say. The next morning, everything felt different, though at first I couldn't explain why. It wasn't something obvious like the house being rearranged or a strange noise echoing through the hallway. The house looked exactly the same. The furniture hadn't moved, the floors were spotless as usual, and the faint citrus scent of cleaning solution floated through the air like it always did after Kilira finished her morning routine. But the atmosphere felt different. I noticed at the moment I walked into the kitchen. Normally, Kilira would be quietly organizing something or checking a cleaning device with the focus of a technician preparing delicate equipment. When she saw me, she would usually nod once and continue working. This time, she immediately straightened. Her posture became perfectly upright, shoulders squared like a soldier greeting a superior officer. Then she placed one fist gently against the center of her chest. My guardian human, she said calmly. Good morning. I stopped halfway to the coffee machine. My what? Guardian human, she repeated. I stared at her for a moment, waiting for the punchline. There wasn't one. She simply stood there looking completely serious. Kilira, I said slowly, we talked about this yesterday. Yes, she replied. You remember what I said? You stated the action was instinctive. Right, I said, pointing at her.
Exactly.
Instinctive. Meaning it wasn't some cultural ritual. She tilted her head slightly, in that thoughtful way she sometimes did, when analyzing human logic. In my culture, she explained calmly, true intentions are revealed through instinctive action. That's not how it works. It is precisely how it works. I opened my mouth to argue, then realized something important. She had already prepared breakfast. Not just prepared it, arranged it. The food was neatly placed on the table with careful symmetry, a glass of water beside it, and a warm drink that smelled suspiciously like the type of tea I preferred after long nights working. Kilira noticed me looking. It is appropriate that a guardian be properly nourished, she said. You didn't have to do that. It is my honor. That sentence made me pause. Kilira had always taken pride in her work, but this felt different. There was a subtle warmth in her voice that hadn't been there before. I sat down slowly. Look, I said after a moment, I think there's been a misunderstanding. She sat across from me, folding her hands neatly on the table. There is no misunderstanding, she replied calmly. Yes, there is. You performed the guardian hold during a moment of danger. You slipped on soap, which created danger. I grabbed you, so you wouldn't fall. That is precisely the function of the gesture. I rubbed my face with one hand. This conversation was already exhausting. Okay, I said carefully. Let's assume for a moment that what you're saying is true. What exactly does this guardian thing mean? Kilira seemed pleased by the question. She straightened slightly, clearly preparing to explain something important. In my species, she began, strength and independence are highly valued. Most individuals protect themselves. Sounds reasonable. However, she continued, there are rare moments when one person chooses to stand behind another during danger and physically restrain them from harm. Yeah, that's called stopping someone from falling. For us, she said patiently, it is a declaration of responsibility. I frowned. Responsibility for what? For their safety. She leaned forward slightly. Symbolically, it means the one who performed the hold accepts the duty of standing behind them in times of danger. I blinked. That sounds like a bodyguard contract. In a way. But you're not my bodyguard.
No.
She smiled faintly. You are the one who guards. That statement sat in the air for several seconds. I pointed toward the living room. You're twice as strong as I am. Physical strength is not the only measure of protection. That still doesn't make sense. Kilira considered that for a moment before speaking again. In our history, the guardian hold became associated with trust and romantic partnership. I nearly choked on my drink. Romantic what? Partnership. Hold on, I said quickly. You're telling me grabbing someone to stop them from falling is considered romantic on your planet? When done during danger, yes. I stared at her in disbelief. That's the most confusing tradition I've ever heard. It is quite straightforward. For aliens, maybe. She didn't seem bothered by my reaction. Instead, she simply watched me with calm patience, as if waiting for me to eventually understand something obvious. I shook my head and stood up. Well, regardless of what your culture thinks, that's not what happened here. She tilted her head slightly. You deny performing the gesture?
No.
You deny it prevented my fall?
No.
You deny the instinct behind the action?
No.
Then the gesture occurred, she concluded. I pointed at her again, but the meaning didn't. She gave a small amused breath that almost sounded like a laugh. Humans often underestimate the meaning of their own actions. I decided arguing was pointless. So I finished breakfast and went to grab my bag for work. That's when things became even stranger. When I stepped outside the apartment building, I noticed two alien neighbors standing near the walkway. They stopped talking the moment they saw me. Then they both looked at me, not casually.
Carefully.
One of them leaned toward the other and whispered something. The second alien's eyes widened. I walked past them slowly. As I did, one of them gave a small, respectful nod. I nodded back awkwardly and kept walking. Halfway down the street, I turned back.
They were still watching me.
Okay, I muttered to myself, that's weird. But the weirdness didn't stop there. Later that afternoon, my communication terminal buzzed with a notification. At first, I assumed it was a work message. Instead, it was a public cultural announcement. The sender was Kilira. I opened it and immediately felt my stomach drop. The message was written in both Galactic Common and her species' native script. The translation read, during a moment of danger within my place of service, a human performed the guardian hold to protect me from harm. I formally acknowledge his protection and honor the bond created by his instinctive courage. Below the message was a short video clip. It showed security footage from the staircase, me grabbing her from behind to stop her fall. And at the bottom of the message was a line of text that made my brain freeze. Status updated. Guardian bond acknowledged. I stared at the screen. Then I slowly whispered the only logical response. Oh no. Because outside my apartment window, several alien neighbors were already gathering. And judging by the way they were looking at my building, word had spread. By the time evening rolled around, I realized the situation had spiraled far beyond anything I could have imagined. Aliens were arriving at my doorstep, one after another, some carrying their traditional ceremonial garb, others in casual uniforms that still somehow made them look intimidating. They weren't here to complain, ask for advice, or perform inspections. They were here to witness the human who had allegedly claimed a warrior Maid in the most audacious way imaginable. Kilira stood calmly at the door, her posture straight and proud, her expression serene. She greeted each visitor with a dignified nod, introducing me as my guardian human. Every time she spoke those words, the aliens' reactions were the same. Wide eyes, gasps, whispers, and subtle bows. I had no idea how many had already heard about the Guardian Hold incident, but judging by the crowd that had appeared on my porch, the message had traveled far and fast. One of the visitors, a tall, copper-skinned warrior with horn-like ridges along his head, stepped forward. His voice was low but carried a commanding authority. "You are the human who performed the Guardian Hold?" he asked. I swallowed hard and nodded, trying to look nonchalant, which was impossible. My mind raced for some kind of reasonable explanation. "It wasn't intentional," I said. She slipped and the copper-skinned alien interrupted me with a soft chuckle. "Intentional or not, you have performed an act that is rare and powerful. A human willing to protect a warrior made instinctively remarkable." I blinked. "You're impressed?" "Impressed is not the word." Another visitor interjected, a smaller blue-skinned alien with eyes like molten silver. "You are extraordinary. Humans are bold, but this is beyond expectation." Kilira's eyes sparkled ever so slightly, and I realized she was silently enjoying the reactions of her peers. She had clearly orchestrated the situation with quiet precision, sending the notification and letting the news spread. One of the aliens, a red-furred veteran with scars lining his forearms, stepped closer and gestured toward me. "Demonstrate the Guardian Hold again. For verification. Show us your instinctive protection." I froze. "Wait, what? You want me to now?" "Yes," Kilira said softly. "It is customary. Only then can the observers truly understand the bond." I glanced around at the assembled crowd, all of them staring at me expectantly. My face turned red. I don't know if I can." Kilira gave a subtle nod, encouraging me. "You already did it once. You can do it again." With a deep breath, I approached her. She stepped onto the floor just in front of me and paused, balancing as if this were a formal ceremony. I reached forward and gently grasped her from behind, carefully positioning myself to prevent any accidental slips. Instantly, I felt the crowd's tension, the way every alien leaned forward as if witnessing a historic event. Kilira's posture remained perfect. She didn't flinch. She didn't resist. But there was a quiet strength in the way she accepted my hold. In her culture, I was beginning to understand, this small gesture was not just about protection. It was a declaration, a signal to her entire species. And judging by the whispers, the crowd had already absorbed the significance. A collective murmur ran through the group, low but audible. "He does it instinctively," one of them whispered. "Even without knowledge, he honors the ritual perfectly." I felt my cheeks heat further. "You all know about this?" I asked Kilira, whispering. She gave a subtle shrug. "The announcement is public within my species. They have been waiting to see this demonstration." I stumbled back slightly as the realization hit me. In the eyes of an entire alien community, I had become a figure of interstellar legend, a human capable of instinctive bravery and cultural understanding without even realizing it. The visitors began asking questions, some polite, some intensely curious. "How did you learn our customs? Have other humans performed this ritual? Will you continue as her guardian?" Each question made me more flustered. I mumbled explanations, each more absurd than the last, but Kilira only smiled faintly. She seemed quietly proud, as if she had orchestrated this display to elevate me in her culture. Later, as the crowd began to thin, I noticed how different the dynamic between Kilira and me had become. She moved closer to me, casually adjusting the cleaning supplies I had accidentally knocked over earlier. Her smile was soft, almost teasing. "They respect you," she said quietly. "And rightly so. You saved me without thought, and that is honorable." I didn't even know that's what I was doing," I admitted, feeling both embarrassed and strangely pleased. "That is precisely what makes it honorable," she replied. It struck me then how this whole ordeal had changed the way I saw her and maybe the way she saw me. What started as an accidental grab had transformed into something much more. Trust, respect, and perhaps even something more delicate had begun to grow between us. The next day, more visitors arrived, each bringing messages, gifts, and curious questions. Some were fellow maids from her species, eager to see the human who had claimed a powerful warrior without ceremony. Others were officials, warriors, or elders who simply wanted to witness the bond firsthand. Every time I glanced at Kilira, I realized she was enjoying every moment, the pride in her eyes unmistakable. And in all of this chaos, one strange truth became clear. Earth humans might be unassuming, awkward, and often oblivious, but to these aliens, we were bold, surprising, and capable of gestures they had long considered sacred. By the time the sun set over the colony, my living room had become a gathering place for stories, questions, and admiration. And as I stood there, feeling both completely overwhelmed and oddly proud, I realized that what had started as a simple accident on a staircase had turned me into something far stranger than I could have imagined. A legend, a guardian, and, somehow, an accidental hero in the eyes of the galaxy. And Kilira? She stood beside me, calm, proud, and undeniably pleased, as if to say that the story was only just beginning. The galaxy now believed humans were unexpectedly bold, and I had become the living proof. By the time night settled over the colony, the crowd of curious aliens had finally thinned, leaving only a few lingering on the edge of the courtyard, murmuring to one another as they glanced at my building. The whole day had felt surreal, like living inside a story I didn't fully understand. I sank into a chair in the living room, rubbing my temples, while Kilira quietly tidied up the remaining cleaning supplies. Despite the chaos earlier, she moved with her usual grace, every motion precise, controlled, yet somehow lighter than usual. I cleared my throat, finally daring to speak. Kilira, about all of this. Today, the visitors, this acclaim, I trailed off, unsure how to describe the absurdity of becoming a minor galactic celebrity because I had caught someone from falling down a staircase. She paused mid-motion, standing upright and looking directly at me, her calm eyes carrying a subtle warmth. "Human," she said softly, "you have nothing to apologize for. You did what any capable being would have done. Yet, instinctively, you performed the guardian hold, as our ancestors intended. That is why they honor you." I exhaled slowly, attempting to process her words. I didn't mean to perform anything. It was just reflex. "And yet it was perfect," she replied. "Sometimes, meaning is found not in intention, but in action." I swallowed, realizing that in her eyes, what I considered a blunder had carried significance far beyond my comprehension. I glanced at her, noting the subtle changes in her demeanor over the day, how her posture seemed more relaxed, how her eyes softened when she looked at me, and how there was an almost imperceptible smile lingering on her lips. It was difficult not to feel a swell of something unexpected in my chest. She stepped closer, and for a brief moment, the usual distance that had defined our relationship vanished. "Human," she whispered, "you have earned my trust in a way no one else has. Even if the ritual was accidental, the gesture itself carries meaning." I felt heat rise to my face, unsure whether to respond with words or simply remain silent. Finally, I managed to say, "Kilira, if I hadn't caught you, none of this would have happened. I'm glad I did, but I also didn't plan any of this. And I certainly didn't expect." I gestured vaguely to the room, where the aftermath of the day still lingered, the subtle scent of cleaning fluid, the arranged furniture, the echoes of alien whispers from earlier. She tilted her head slightly, considering me. "You worry too much, human. Events unfold as they must, and you acted in the moment. That is all that matters." Her words carried an unexpected reassurance. I realized that beyond the embarrassment and the unintended celebrity status, there was something undeniably genuine in the connection that had formed. I had stopped her from falling. She had accepted that action as a formal declaration of trust. And somehow, amidst the chaos of alien admirers and cultural misunderstandings, a bond had begun to take shape between us. Later, we found ourselves in the kitchen again, quietly tidying up the aftermath of the day's events. The house was finally calm, the strange energy of observers gone, leaving only the soft hum of the ventilation system and the distant sounds of the colony at night. I glanced at Kilira, who was carefully placing a stack of cloths back on the shelf. "You know," I said cautiously, "all of this could have been avoided if I just let you fall down the stairs." Her eyes widened slightly, then she chuckled softly, a sound I had never heard from her before. Human, that would have been unacceptable. Not only would it have been careless, but it would have deprived me of acknowledging the bond formed today. Sometimes, accidents reveal truths that deliberate actions cannot. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling with a mixture of relief and disbelief. "So, I'm a hero now." "In the eyes of my species, yes," she replied calmly. "You are a remarkable human, one who acted without thought yet earned honor. Whether you intended it or not, your action carries weight." I felt a strange pride, mingled with embarrassment. Heroism had never been my goal. I had simply reacted. But somehow, the universe had interpreted that reaction in ways I could never have anticipated. Kilira approached and placed a hand lightly on my shoulder, a gesture that, in her species, signified respect and trust. The warmth of the touch sent a small thrill through me, and I realized that the bond between us had quietly shifted. No longer was she merely my maid or a distant observer of human habits. She had begun to trust me, perhaps even like me, in ways that transcended culture and species. "Human," she said softly, "the galaxy now sees your boldness, but do not be misled by their admiration. True strength is measured not by recognition, but by the courage of your actions in the moments no one is watching." I nodded slowly, understanding. It wasn't the crowd of aliens, the whispers, or the messages on the network that mattered. It was the simple, accidental act that had sparked trust and connection between two very different beings. Later that night, we stood near the window, looking out at the softly glowing colony lights. The sky was speckled with distant starships, their gentle hums drifting through the cool air. I glanced at Kilira, who was now quietly observing the horizon, her expression thoughtful. "You know," I said, "this could get out of hand. More aliens will hear about me being your guardian." She turned to me, a faint smirk touching her lips.
Let them.
"Humans are unexpected, unpredictable. It will amuse them, and perhaps inspire them. And for me, it is satisfying." I chuckled nervously. "Satisfying, huh?" "Yes," she replied softly, "because it demonstrates trust, courage, and care. All qualities worth honoring." I realized then that beneath the absurdity of the situation, beneath the embarrassment and the unintended galactic attention, there was something beautiful happening. A bond had been formed that transcended cultural misunderstandings, accidents, and even species. And in the quiet of that night, with the colony lights twinkling like distant stars, I felt a warmth that went beyond pride or embarrassment. It was the beginning of something genuine, something unexpected, and something entirely ours. And as we stood there together, side by side, I couldn't help but think that maybe being a human guardian in the galaxy wasn't so bad after all. Kilira glanced at me, her eyes reflecting a quiet satisfaction, and I knew in that moment that whatever absurdity or adventure awaited us next, we would face it together. The galaxy could think humans were bold, impulsive, or even ridiculous. And maybe we were. But in that small apartment, with a warrior maid at my side, I realized that human boldness had a kind of charm the galaxy would never forget, and neither would I.